My name is Cabra, my pronoun is they, and I am back to making content after quite a break. It was a combination of things, which I think I'll talk about probably on my TikTok instead of talking about it here, just because I don't want to get too off topic. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the land I live on is the ancestral lands of the Wazaze and Seneca peoples. A rumor has it, I haven't been able to find a reliable source, but apparently this valley used to be a center of trade, and it was, it wasn't necessarily always in the hands of one particular group, and switched hands as kind of an in-between spot. But I will continue to research the history and see if that's really what happened or if it's just a rumor. So today we're going to be doing something that I'm really excited to talk about, which is taking a practice from the grimoire tradition and making it into a tool that is usable by spirit workers who are polytheist animists, and also, not the usual complaints people have about the old grimoire methods. Oh, it's super hierarchical, you're getting really violent with the spirits for no reason, they didn't even do anything. So we're going to be adapting a really powerful technique here. You might be going, evocation. That's a word I've never heard before. It's a fancy word that means calling up a spirit outside a human body. If you call up a spirit inside a human body, it's called invocation. So inside a human body, invocation. Whereas if you were to evoke them, you could either evoke them into the air of the room, into a bowl of water. We'll get into the details of that more as we go on. So this is the Triangle of Evocation as it's most often seen. It comes from the Solomonic grimoire lineages. It's most well known for being in Mather's translation of the Keys of Solomon. And honestly, even if it appeared nowhere else, because of how used it is, it would still be worth talking about. So the grimoires traditionally think of every spirit that you're going to run into as, not being trustworthy, wanting to harm you, wanting to try and damn your soul, even if it was an elemental spirit as opposed to some sort of like vampire soul-sucking thing. That would still be the assumption of the spirit. So for these reasons, especially if it's the first time you're talking to the spirit, the triangle goes outside the circle. So you're inside the circle. There's a little semi-sphere around you to keep you untouchable by the spirits. The spirit is in the triangle. And the idea is that the triangle binds the spirit so that they kind of have to listen to you, whether they like it or not. And it also is supposed to make it harder for them to lie, right? This is the traditional way of looking at it. Typically, you place a scrying tool in the middle. Incense is very common. Black scrying mirrors are also pretty common. So I would keep that in mind as we move forward. If we kind of look at what it does instead of what people say it does, it kind of becomes obvious that it's a signal booster, right? Much like a radio antenna or a satellite dish. The triangle is there to make it so that you can form a clearer connection with the spirit through whatever medium you're deciding to talk to them through. I would say that if you're meeting with a spirit for the first time and you don't know them, like they're not being introduced to you by a fellow spirit worker or a mentor, I would definitely place it outside the circle the first time. But I also have a very strict rule in my house that you are allowed to leave whenever you want. You are not allowed to overstay your welcome. And that's my rule for human guests, animal guests, and also for spirit guests, right? In order for us to kind of soften the edges of this thing and make it a little bit more pliable as a tool, we're going to have to change the names. And ultimately, the goal is to say, well, if I'm talking to a spirit that I know, that I have a mutually beneficial relationship with, who've been working together for a while, do I need to have the triangle outside the circle, right? Like, if I know you, it's okay to tell you my birthday, right? If you pull my birth chart or you figure out what my sun sign is, it's not going to be the end of the world, right? I'm not going to steal my ID if it's someone I've known for 4 years. I will say I'm not the first person to think of doing variants on this triangle. This one, the black and white one with the black background, is supposedly a triangle that has Beelzebub's name in what appears to be Greek in it. I found this image through El Apotheca on Etsy, and they claim that it was based on a design by Michael W. Ford. This design is supposed to reference the concept of the 3 chiefs of hell, or like a sort of triumvirate empire of hell. And this is an idea that's found, I think, in the Grimorium Verum line that is French, but don't quote me on that last part. I also found this one, which appears to be a Thalamic version. It was on the Redbubble for an account called Secret Chiefs, but I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't trust Redbubble as far as I can throw it to, like, tell me who made something. I really hope Secret Chiefs is the right people, and that I'm giving the credit to the right people. But if I'm not, if you happen to know who came up with this idea, like, please let me know. This one I found on a post by Brother Enoch in the occultandmagic.blogspot. He may have gotten it from someone else, but that's where I was introduced to it. I will say part of the work is based on a concept called Proto-Hebrew, and apparently Kat Ironwood of Lucky Mojo is somehow spreading this information around. And I will say that her stuff has been hit and miss. So I cannot tell you whether or not that particular triangle is functional. And the last thing I wanted to say is that a lot of the, like, summoning circles and summoning triangles you'll see out there are based off of artists who are having a good time. And I'm not here to tell these people that they can't or that they're doing something wrong. I actually get a lot of joy from looking at these artistic renditions of what a summoning circle or a summoning pentacle or a summoning triangle might look like, because it reveals a lot about what someone thinks are the fundamental forces of the universe. Like, what is the fundamental geometry with which this person understands the world around them? So this is an example of one of those. It's a artistic rendition of a summoning circle. I think it's called a summoning plate. It's from the fashion company Killstar. I found this particular image on the website Dolls Kill. You'll also see a bunch of summoning circles in anime, but one thing that you'll notice is that these tend to be circles. And this particular geometry that we're looking at right now in actual practice is a triangle. The circle is the thing that protects you, that you stand in to empower yourself. The entity gets summoned in the triangle, right? One final note here, I will say that Brother Enoch's image here has the appropriate coloring that I mentioned earlier is typical for the triangle. So when I translate things, hold on a second, from monotheistic modes of thought, there are some things you have to understand as a polytheist inheriting something from monotheists, which is that monotheists take every single job, epithet, attribute, or power and attribute all of it to Creator. So they have taken this multifaceted understanding of the universe and shoved it all into one concept, which functions for them, not for me. So a lot of what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking out these little divine qualities attributed to Creator, and then we're going to be recognizing them as spirits or deities on their own merit. So angels are actually a really great example of this, because if you look at, for example, Raphael, his name loosely translates to divine healing or God's healing. So it's kind of a question of, like, if you say, and Raphael came unto Tobit and told him blah, 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 is it that a being called Raphael, who is in a spirit of their own consciousness, came to Tobit? Or is it that God's healing came unto Tobit and Tobit was just received a message out of thin air, or was like received an energetic current of God's healing? It kind of depends on how you read it. I would definitely say that you can read it however you believe. But a polytheist would be like, oh no, God's healing is definitely a spirit of healing, right? At least that's how I would think about it. The other thing we're going to do is a lot of the words in the traditional triangle and in grimoire conjurations also derive their meaning from scripture. The idea that the Old and New Testament are written exactly how they are written because Creator willed them to be written this way. And so to quote them exactly and to write things exactly as they are written in those texts is very important. That is not a very strict rule. You will see a lot of what I call cosplay Hebrew, including in Mather's Keys, where you'll translate the name Jesus, which probably would have been written in Aramaic, into Hebrew, or more obviously, you'll see like quotes from John, which would have been written in Aramaic or Greek, are like transliterated phonetically into Hebrew, which is a thing someone did. That sure was a thing someone did. But these are my principles of translation, is that we're going to try and take these attributes attributed to the one and then kind of pull it apart into a polytheistic animist context. So I'm going to just go ahead and get this out of the way. I don't like Michael. Plenty of people do. I'm not here to shame you if you like Michael and want to keep the name. Michael's a fine archangel of the sun or Mercury, depending on how you see them. Because I don't work with Michael, I usually work with Uriel instead. I also try, and when I'm doing work privately, I try to use Latin as a magical language, because what I'm trying to evoke with magical language is a call up to my ancestors, both my sorceress ancestors and my blood ancestors, to kind of like lubricate the wheels, so to speak, so that I can do what I need to do. So light in Latin is lux, L-U-X, and it just happens to fit into a triangle really well because there's 3 letters. What I would say is you should use the name that you attribute to the archangel of the sun. Michael is that for many people. I have occasionally seen the oddball person say that Raphael is the archangel of the sun and Michael is the archangel of Mercury. But whoever you view as the archangel of the sun is the spirit whose name should go in the triangle, right? And we'll get to why in a minute. So the name Anaphaxiton, and I do have a reference for this at the end of the presentation for those who want to see the breakdown. It is Greek, and the loose translation of it is the bright name. So for me, if I'm thinking about a bright name as an epithet for an entity that's not creator, that for me is Lucifer, right? Lucifer loosely translates to lightbringer and is also an epithet, is also the name of Venus in Latin, because Venus announces the arrival of the sun in their morning star position. And so for me, between Michael and Anaphaxiton being 2 of the 4 names on the traditional triangle, it makes it really obvious that this triangle is solar in nature and it is about light. The idea is that it is the light that helps you see clearly the message that you are supposed to receive, even if you're not using like your eyeballs to scry, right? Like if you put a music making device or some kind of speaker in the middle of the triangle and that's your scrying tool, it's still a matter of illuminating the mind to see clearly, right? Premumaton, again, I have a reference for this translation at the end of the thing, loosely translates to the first name. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe this is the name of the first being that ever get named. And then I went to Genesis and it said, and God created heaven and earth. And I'm like, oh, so heaven, space, is the first thing made. And that makes sense because the Big Bang made space, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about it and thinking about it. It's not quite clicking. And then I said, well, the first name doesn't necessarily mean the first name created. It could mean the first named in ritual, right? It could be that this is a matter of the first spirit you call in ritual, their name goes here, because it would make sense. There's a cross-cultural phenomenon where the first entity named in ritual is the entity who's going to carry your prayers to wherever they need to go, right? So for me, Orions is the first being whose name I resonate when I perform ritual, because I do my version of the LBRP, and the elements are acknowledged, but they're not entities. Orions is the first entity whose name I say, so that's the name that I placed here. The last name is Tetragrammaton. It literally translates to the 4-letter name. For those of you who are not in the know, that is Yod He Vod He. I know I'm mispronouncing that. I'm sorry. We usually pronounce that in Christian circles as Jehovah. It appears all over the Bible. It's supposed to be unpronounceable. There's a whole lot of lore around it. Like, people have analyzed this name to death and back. But it typically forms the base conjurations and talismans are built on. But the thing is that it makes sense to use the ineffable name of Creator if you're going to be attributing the triangle to Creator, because you attribute the triangle, everything, to Creator, right? Monotheism, that's what you do. But that's not who the triangle is for. And when we look at Lux, Lucifer, and Orions, it's very obvious it's a solar triangle. You know, Orions being associated with the rising sun and the element of air, Lux and Lucifer being associated with light. So for me, I took the sigil of the Archangel of the Sun and I made that the base of the triangle, because it is the base of the power that the triangle is built on, with Orions and Lucifer kind of playing, for me, supporting roles for the Archangel of the Sun in helping me illuminate the messages, right? One thing I will also say is that Jordan Peterson, can't thank that man enough for his work, has done a compare and contrast of the sigils for the 7 planetary archangels, which usually come to us through the lineage of the Heptameron, or the Elucidarium Necromantiae, which I think is an Iberian lineage, Iberian-ish. He put the name of the angel and the drawing of the sigil, and this has been used both for Raphael and for Michael. So it seems like the sigil is attached to the position, not necessarily to the name of the angel. Either that, or it's one of those things where it was written down incorrectly to mess with people. I'm not entirely certain. I'm more a fan of the idea of the former, because I firmly believe that there's not one right truth to how this all works. It's more like it's a folkloric practice. It's going to change from place to place and copy to copy. So this is the final version. I made 2 triangles for myself. One of them, since I have the blessing of being able to do some very, very light woodworking, is a wooden triangle. I got a wood burner to put the names and the sigil of the Archangel of the Sun on the sides, and the LUX on the top. And I also drilled a hole through the middle so that it does hold incense. I have put a brazier on it and it burned fine. I have put a stick incense in there and it burned fine. The mat, pardon the candle wax, I tested it. Now, you know, from the ash and the candle wax, I use these things before I bring them to you to make sure they work. Yeah, so that one is used. I have used it for tarot card readings, and also if I was going to do a water bowl, which I haven't had a chance to do yet, I would put it theoretically on that. But yeah, I'm going to do a demonstration of how to use these tools in another video, because I don't want this to get super long, and it's just going to be easier for the way that I make things if the videos are separate. So yeah, I want to give a thanks to Gilbert the Occultist for their 2010 article on Triangle of the Art Translated. That's where I got my understandings of the names Permumaton and Ephaxiton. Again, thanks always to Jordan Peterson's Esoteric Archives. If you can afford to send that man some money or buy one of his books, I highly recommend it. He's doing excellent work as a translator. He also was recently featured on the Glitch Bottle podcast, if you want to go listen to him talk. Images are from Raw Pixel, unless they're stated otherwise. I tried to grab things that were in Raw Pixel's public domain section. And finally, thank you to SlidesGo for Flat Icon and FreePic for helping me have a presentation that wasn't just black text on a white background. But yeah, thanks for listening. I hope that I will see you in the next one and that I've inspired you to reconsider using this tool from a polytheist and animist context.